What if I told you that Battlefield had a TF2-like spinoff? One that came before Fortnite and paved the way for many of that game's gameplay elements, including general movement and speed of play. For many of you watching, this is probably a surprise, much as it was to me when I first discovered the story of Battlefield Heroes years back. Battlefield Heroes launched as the first free-to-play Battlefield game in June of 2009. In the game, you chose between 2 factions and 3 different classes, and participated in the typical Battlefield gameplay of each side having limited amounts of lives, and the map being one focused on conquest of key points, with vehicles littered throughout. With more Battlefield games on the way, and no signs of slowing down for the yet beloved vehicular warfare-based shooter, it seemed a ripe time to talk about one of the least known entries in the series. Now, if you don't know about it, there's usually a sign that something went wrong in the advertising, or at least in the fate of Battlefield Heroes in general. It is Battlefield, after all. Battlefield Heroes, despite reaching as many as 7 million player count total, shut down service in 2014. Many have considered Battlefield Heroes to be a game ahead of its time, and unfairly maligned, while others might take a mere look at this gameplay footage and feel quite differently. Regardless of your feelings of the game, if you know it at all, let's attempt to uncover the largest contributing factors for the game's ultimate demise. Grab a vehicle, a tank, or even a plane and choose a side, Royal Army or National Army, and class as we solve the mystery of Battlefield Heroes' death. This episode of Death of a Game is sponsored by Ridge Wallet. Ridge Wallet is a sleek, industrial, and ultimately light-designed, durable aluminum body wallet with a choice of a clip or strap, as well as over 30 colors and styles to choose from. My old wallet I got from a convenience store. But the wallet was cheap, and not only could you tell that visually, its functionality was totally lacking. Sometimes my cards would fall out, and even my money. With my new Ridge wallet, I haven't had any of those issues. It even holds up to 12 cards plus your cash. And my new Ridge wallet provides both a visual and functional upgrade. Best of all, Ridge wallet is tiny and designed to fit in your front pocket. Most recently, Ridge wallet afforded me the ability to buy a new microphone, a mic stand, a new chair, and a new desk. So make sure to show them some extra love. But if you don't believe me, believe the other 40,000 5-star reviews. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/nerdslayer. That's ridge.com/nerdslayer and use code nerdslayer, link in description. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Death of a Game, sponsored by Ridge Wallet. Usually in this series we start from the very beginning, but Battlefield has a dozen or so titles, and has been steadily launching games since their first in 2002. Therefore, we're not going to talk about all of those other games and the whole story of Battlefield. If you want that, you can check out this video on screen by Jack Frags. EA's recently newly appointed CEO John Riccitiello, the guy responsible for acquiring both Pandemic Studios and BioWare for EA in a Peter Baelish political level scheme in 2008 to spearhead the new rise of a business strategy yet to really affect the Western market. Through the massive success of FIFA Free-to-Play, released back in 2006 in South Korea, EA would start to have their Western partners mimic this strategy and apply it to the West. Japan and Korea, I both think, get credit for creating gacha games, and microtransactions in general, but the Western market didn't immediately accept this, and part of that is because buying virtual goods in Korea is illegal, not just against the terms of service. This means that they can better control the market themselves when they allow you to buy things from the cash shop. Free-to-play games remove the pay ceiling and can open up the spending potential in ways a box price game or a subscription-based game simply can't. EA in 2008, through the announcement of Battlefield Heroes, a new Battlefield game using the Battlefield 2142 engine developed by DICE, but targeting a younger audience used to a more Team Fortress 2 approach, would be trying to capitalize with a new strategy of monetization, free-to-play. The main challenge, besides the Western reluctance to the free-to-play market at the time, was actually the original Battlefield player base, who wasn't really used to a free-to-play game period or allowing things to be purchasable in-game. IGN had a sparsely detailed hands-on preview of Battlefield Heroes in February of 2008, where the game would be detailed to be more of a cartoony, casual style of game that would be free to play and only on PC. When asked why they went for a more casual approach and made Battlefield Heroes free to play, DICE stated that the team went on a business trip to South Korea at the end of 2006 and saw the huge success of this free to play model in that country. Given DICE always likes to be at the forefront of new online trends, we decided to experiment with this business model in the West. Desires for gold and pillage aside, details about the actual game itself would be revealed in this article from IGN. For starters, the game would be accessed through a web portal, much like popular free-to-play shooters in the Eastern market, and you would choose between two factions, the Royal or National armies. From there, you would then choose between 3 different roles. Soldier, which was kind of like the assault and medic kit from the Battlefield franchise, a class capable of using a sub, shoddy, pistol, and also healing people. And then there's the Gunner class, which is a tanky machine gun and rocket using class that corresponds to the support and anti-tank roles. Commando is a mix of recon and special forces, which featured a sniper rifle, a knife, and a pistol. Commando can nearly go fully invisible, as well as doing the most damage in the game. According to DICE, they toyed with adding another additional class, but were unable to flesh one out enough. You can progress your account as well in Battlefield Heroes and level up your classes, gaining new special abilities and clothing. The kicker, as previously described by EA CEO, was the game and its microtransactions. At the time of questioning, DICE stated that these were merely cosmetic, but were open to the idea of doing more, such as items with XP boosts and maybe even items that boost stats. Gameplay was the standard Battlefield affair of a life limit on each team as they battled out for control over territory or captured flags, but more stripped down. A worrying sign was the reporting of the game launching with just 2 maps, which seemed dangerously low for a free-to-play game or a Battlefield game period. Other key details explained were the camera being third person, and Battlefield Heroes being cartoony or not meant that it was going to feature the iconic Battlefield vehicles. GameSpot was positive in their coverage of the pre-launch title, stating that although the game was only 8 versus 8, which was pretty low for a Battlefield title, they thought Battlefield Heroes was just as fun as any other game in the series. Comparisons to TF2 for Battlefield Heroes were being embraced by DICE, but they admitted the game wasn't really TF2. Battlefield Heroes would undergo a professional tester-only test session under NDA May 6th, 2009. May 19th, and the beta signups would go live for all. EA would announce a huge delay for Battlefield Heroes July 29th, 2008, pushing the game allegedly to later the same year. According to Riccatello, we decided to increase its focus on some of the social networking features. The last thing we want to do is jab it into the marketplace, he says as he makes a free-to-play Battlefield game. Battlefield Heroes would release a trailer February 6th, 2009, as the game was pushed from a 2008 launch now to sometime later in 2009. This trailer ends up kind of being ironic because of what we will learn later in the video, which was almost too self-aware by EA in hindsight. EA boldly claims in this trailer through the use of humor that Battlefield Heroes wouldn't be a game that you can just pay to win in.
We also sell microtransaction items to our players. Items like new hats, mustaches, and weapon upgrades, which enhance the game and make your character look cool without completely breaking things by letting some rich kid kill you with a special nuclear missile he bought that you can't afford.
Regardless of the hiccup, Battlefield Heroes was still full steam ahead, reaching over 100,000 beta signups by the end of February 2009. Battlefield Heroes would add yet more maps to the game to beef up on content before officially launching. Battlefield Heroes, coming as a surprise to most, would have a sudden surprise launch June 25th, 2009. According to aggregate review website Metacritic, Battlefield Heroes would score a 69 out of 100 from 24 different critics, which was low for a Battlefield game but salvageable enough for a game reception going forward for DICE. The reception was positive concerning the free-to-play business model at launch, but critics did point out that the game was already so early on and noticeable after a few rounds of play, a bit repetitive and lacked the variety to have a long-term audience. IGN in their review of Battlefield Heroes gave the title a strong 8 out of 10. Like most, they were impressed by the price point, which was free minus the paid cosmetics, but also like other critics, they were questioning if there was enough variety to keep players from getting bored in a few weeks. Besides this concern, IGN was largely positive concerning their experiences with Battlefield Heroes. IGN wasn't the only one positive concerning the title either, as by the end of July, the player base had already jumped up to 1 million player accounts, which isn't exactly players, but it's total accounts period. To keep momentum going, DICE added another map in September of 2009. In a shocking, or not so shocking if you remember this was the whole premise of Battlefield Heroes from EA's point of view from the beginning, EA would present sweeping changes to the cash shop. Likely not happy with enough of their return on their investment, they now would be adding rental weapons to the game that would be leased for up to 3 days, but not permanently acquired. Someone did the math on how long it would take to rent a weapon through free-to-play means, and it was through playing 60 rounds, which was about 5 hours of playtime every day. Although Battlefield Heroes was getting closer to 2 million player accounts, this blow to their audience and image was crucial. It fundamentally changed the game in a way that was previously said, and it even joked about in a trailer from DICE themselves that they wouldn't cross into this territory where credit cards would equal power in the game. But in reality, EA always planned to leverage the microtransactions in Battlefield Heroes. It was just a matter of to what extent, and once they weren't happy enough with the returns they were getting with the fair cosmetics only business model, they had to ramp things up. 2010 would add new content to the game in way of maps and a normal round of balance changes. By March 2011, Battlefield Heroes' issues with their monetization and losing faith of their core audience aside, was hitting a total player count of 7 million players. DICE also in March would be launching another free-to-play Battlefield title, this one being aimed at more of the traditional Battlefield player base, but sort of ended up being this weird Chinese shooter Battlefield clone, which is kind of a story for another time. Now you know it's bad when the lolsec hackers are targeting your data, and over 550,000 account details were leaked in an attack, and the game was temporarily even taken offline. This could just be some attack on EA, or perhaps maybe they were angry about Battlefield Heroes. 2011 would add 2 more maps in Wicked Wake and Perilous Port, bringing the overall map count to 10, which wasn't bad now for a 2-year-old free-to-play game. Battlefield Heroes would take the Battlefield franchise for the first time to space in April of 2012, and follow that up this summer with another map added in Fortress Frenzy, marking the game's 3rd anniversary. Inland Invasion was introduced September 2012, and this would mark the very last time we would see a new map or significant content update for Battlefield Heroes going forward. 2013 we would see no new maps or significant updates for Battlefield Heroes. Would EA or DICE abandon a Battlefield title, even if it wasn't really a mainline one? 2014 would pass, and unfortunately, more of the same would plague the game, with all signs pointing towards dire consequences for the future of Battlefield Heroes. The end for Battlefield Heroes would be announced April 2015, as EA would cite them as one of the 4 titles to be shuttered, also including Battlefield Play for Free, the other free-to-play Battlefield title. The servers would terminate 90 days after the announcement, making the final month of Battlefield Heroes July 2015. Gone in the wind nearly as fast as it came in. That wouldn't be the end of Battlefield Heroes, though. 4 years after the servers were shut down, there were rumblings of a private server dubbed the Rising Hub Project. Jack Frags even covered this on his YouTube channel, and the server is still currently playable without actually having to purchase any of the microtransactions that played the game originally. I personally think that if titles had the potential or were good games originally that then met an unfortunate demise, they nearly always in some sort of way managed to have a private server or a community trying to bring the game back. Simply put, communities don't try to resurrect bad games. So then, if Battlefield Heroes had an all-time 7+ million players and scored relatively well according to critics, why was the title unsuccessful after a mere 5 years of live? Nearing the end of this video means we should have enough of the clues probably already gathered concerning the largest contributing factors for the death of Battlefield Heroes. But before we get to the deduction, we have a bit more to cover concerning the fate of Battlefield Heroes. Battlefield Heroes, no matter how much good there was in the game, was flawed from the start. The entire premise of the game was created on bringing free-to-play monetization to the Western market. This is repeated numerous times in interviews. None of that screams the passion people know the Battlefield franchise for, such as Bad Company 2, which came out at the same time. Battlefield Heroes feels less like it's inspired by TF2 and more like it's inspired by a Chinese free-to-play shooter, which was very commonly using these weapon rental systems for monetization. There's almost something to be said about forcing a business model on your audience who otherwise had little familiarity with such, or possibly even interest. There's little evidence to state that the Battlefield player base is the same kind of player base to play free-to-play titles. When the game only has 3 classes and feels and plays like a heavily stripped down Battlefield, it's hard not to feel like the game was either rushed or specifically targeted at being a low cost to turn a profit type game. Now when that music starts to play, it's time to put this case to bed. Battlefield Heroes lacked variety of play and longevity of play. Monetization and microtransactions plague the game. The purpose of Battlefield Heroes first and foremost was to make money. The Battlefield audience wasn't really asking for a free-to-play title and what Battlefield Heroes entailed. Battlefield Heroes, for some of the Battlefield series fans, might be one of the worst Battlefield titles, up there with Battlefield Play for Free, which was also shuttered in the same amount of time as Battlefield Heroes at the same time. But for some, Battlefield Heroes was the door for fans into the Battlefield franchise in the first place as a whole. The more cartoony and casual approach was able to appeal to a broader audience and likely attract more Battlefield fans to the franchise in general. There's an unmistakable charm about Battlefield Heroes, both in the lean and minimal system specs, the music and sound effects, and the overall silliness of the presentation, which was not typical for a Battlefield game. Battlefield Heroes should be a cautionary tale for developers and publishers alike. The dangers of greed. What would have happened if DICE kept things going as they had before the large shift in monetization? One thing's for sure, it would have been better for the game's longevity, legacy, and I would even argue monetization. Battlefield Heroes helped lead the way with its wacky gameplay for the behemoth of an online third-person shooter in Fortnite, and that influence has now been felt globally. Thanks for watching, guys.
Your universe is not alone.